Hello everyone, Detective Frost here. Welcome back to the True Crime series, The Cold Files. File number 01D, the trail where Amy Bechtel disappeared. Just after midnight, on a quiet mountain road outside Lander, Wyoming, searchers found Amy Bechtel's white car. It was sitting near Burnt Gulch, in the dark stillness of the mountains. The doors were unlocked. Some of her belongings were still inside. There was no sign of a struggle, no clear explanation waiting in the dust beside the road, and Amy was not there. At first, there was nothing about the situation that seemed unusual. Amy was a runner, and a strong one. She knew the outdoors, knew the rhythm of long distances, and she was comfortable in the kind of rugged country that surrounded Lander. For someone like her, driving into the mountains to run, train, or look over a route was not unusual. Amy Joy Rowe Bechtel was 24 years old. She had studied at the University of Wyoming, built her life around running, and was known by friends as active, focused, and full of energy. She lived in a community where trails, forests, climbing routes, and mountain roads were part of everyday life. Her husband, Steve, was also connected to that outdoor world through climbing. In many ways, this was the kind of place Amy understood. But later, one small detail would change the way people looked at the entire case. Amy had been preparing for a 10K race planned in the Shoshone National Forest area, and that may explain why she was near Loop Road that afternoon. What it does not explain is how a healthy, experienced runner could vanish so completely from a place that would soon be searched again and again. Did Amy suffer an accident somewhere beyond the road? Did she meet someone out there? Or did something happen so quietly that the mountains kept the answer hidden? For Amy, a run in the mountains was not unusual. What was unusual was that by nightfall, she had not come home. The day Amy Bechtel disappeared did not begin like the kind of day people would later study, reconstruct, and argue about for years. On the morning of July 24, 1997, Amy reportedly left the apartment she shared with her husband Steve in Lander, Wyoming, and went about ordinary errands in town. There was no public argument, no known scene, no obvious moment when the day seemed to turn dangerous. According to reports, she left home sometime around 9:30 in the morning, moving through a day that, at first, looked completely normal. By early afternoon, Amy was still being seen in familiar places. Around 2:30 p.m., she was reportedly spotted at a photo shop in Lander. For investigators, that sighting became important because it helped narrow the window. It placed Amy alive and in town, in the middle of the afternoon, only hours before her car would become the center of the case. After that, the timeline becomes less certain. Investigators later believed Amy may have driven toward the Loop Road area, near Shoshone National Forest, possibly to run or to check part of the route for an upcoming 10K race. For someone unfamiliar with Wyoming's open country, that might sound risky, but for Amy, it was not out of character. She was a serious runner, comfortable outdoors, and used to training in the landscape around Lander. That is one reason the first explanation seemed simple. Maybe she had parked her car and gone for a run. Maybe she had taken the wrong turn, fallen, become injured, or been caught after dark in difficult terrain. And in wilderness cases, the first explanation is often the simplest one: an injury, a wrong turn, a fall. But in Amy's case, even the simplest explanation refused to settle. At around 4:30 that afternoon, Steve Bechtel returned home after being away with friends near the Dubois area, reportedly scouting climbing locations. Amy was not there. At first, that may not have been alarming. Amy trained outdoors. She could be gone longer than expected. A delayed run was not immediately a sign of disaster. But as the hours passed, the feeling changed. By evening, Amy still had not come home. Calls were made. Friends, family, and law enforcement began to understand that this was no longer just a late return from a run. Somewhere between the ordinary errands of that morning and the darkness settling over the mountains, Amy had vanished. Then, around 1 o'clock in the morning on July 25th, searchers found her car. It was near Burnt Gulch, along Loop Road. The vehicle was unlocked. Some of Amy's belongings were still inside. According to some reports, items such as her keys, sunglasses, and a list of errands were found in or near the vehicle, though details about the exact contents have been reported differently over time. What is known is that the car gave investigators a location, but not an answer. It proved Amy had reached the mountain road, or at least that her car had. but it did not prove what happened after she stepped away from it. That was the detail that made the case so difficult to understand. If Amy had gone running and suffered an accident nearby, why was there no clear trail leading to her? If she had become lost, why did searchers fail to find a definite sign? If someone else had been involved, why were there no direct witnesses who could clearly explain what happened at that place, in that narrow window of time? At the beginning, the abandoned car may have supported the wilderness theory. It seemed to suggest Amy had parked, gone out on foot, and never made it back. But later, the same car became more troubling. It was the strongest physical link to Amy's last known movements, yet it explained almost nothing. From that single parked car, the case began to split into several possible stories, each one disturbing in a different way. Search teams moved through the surrounding terrain. Volunteers, law enforcement, dogs, and other resources were used to examine the mountain roads, forested areas, and rough country around Loop Road. The effort grew large and exhausting, driven by the hope that Amy might be injured somewhere, waiting to be found. But as the searches continued without a confirmed trace of her, that hope became harder to hold. There was one detail that did not fit: the lack of a clear ending. No body was found, no confirmed accident site was discovered, no single piece of evidence turned the search into a recovery. And without that, investigators began to consider another possibility: that Amy's disappearance may not have been caused by the wilderness at all. From there, investigators had to consider a more troubling possibility. Steve Bechtel came under scrutiny during the investigation, partly because spouses are often examined closely in missing person cases, and partly because certain details attracted attention from police and the media. Reports have discussed his schedule, his writings, and his decision not to take a polygraph on the advice of an attorney. But this part of the case has always required caution. Steve denied involvement, and his account of being away with friends that day was supported by others. To this day, no one has been convicted in connection with Amy's disappearance. Still, public attention remained divided. Some believed the mountains held the answer. Others wondered whether someone had crossed Amy's path. There were also reports of a vehicle resembling Steve's being seen near the area, though witness reports are not the same as conclusive proof. In later years, other names, including Dale Wayne Eaton, were discussed in connection with possible theories, but no public evidence has established that he was connected to Amy's disappearance. That is what made the case so unsettling. The evidence did not build toward one clean conclusion. It opened possibilities, but none of them led to a firm answer. Amy had a normal day. She was seen in town. Her car was found in the mountains. Searchers covered the area. No confirmed trace of her was recovered. Investigators considered both an accident and foul play. Suspicion moved in different directions, but nothing became a final answer. For Amy's family, that absence became its own kind of pain. There was no body, no confession, no trial, no official explanation that could give them a clear story to live with. Steve, too, remained a figure of public suspicion for years, despite the fact that no legal conclusion has found him responsible. In Lander, the disappearance changed the way people looked at a landscape they loved. For many people in Lander, the mountains represented freedom, endurance, and escape. After Amy vanished, they also carried a question that was difficult to shake. Could someone experienced, strong, and familiar with the outdoors disappear there in a single afternoon without leaving a clear trace behind? Amy was later declared legally dead in 2004, but her remains have never been found. No one has been convicted in her case. And after the searches ended, after the theories multiplied, one fact remained unchanged: Amy was still missing. For the people who loved Amy, the hardest part was not only that she disappeared, it was that the mountains gave back her car, but nothing else. What makes Amy Bechtel's case so difficult to forget is not simply that she disappeared. It is that the case begins with something so ordinary: a runner, a mountain road, a car parked near the edge of wilderness. Nothing about that image gives a complete answer. And yet, almost every theory begins there. The car was not hidden, it was found. It gave searchers a place to start. But it also became the central contradiction of the case. If Amy vanished because of the terrain, why did the search reveal so little? If another person was involved, why was there no clear witness, no confirmed scene, no final piece of evidence strong enough to close the case? That is the painful space where this story remains. In cases like this, silence can be dangerous. It invites theories, suspicion, and sometimes unfair certainty. But the absence of proof is not the same as proof of absence. It only means the truth has not yet been reached. Amy Bechtel's case is haunting because it does not give us the comfort of a clear ending. There is a location, a vehicle, a missing runner, and then a silence no search could break. And until something new is found, the same question remains. Did Amy vanish because of the wilderness, because of another person, or because of something investigators have not yet uncovered? Amy Bechtel's case leaves behind a road, a car, and a question no search could fully answer. But unanswered timelines are not limited to the wilderness. Sometimes they appear in a busy city, surrounded by co-workers, roommates, cameras, and people who saw something without knowing what it meant. Just 1 month earlier, in San Francisco, another young woman walked out of an ordinary afternoon and into a mystery built from missed signals. File number 01E, the summer job that became Kristen Modafferi's last known day. At 3 p.m. on June 23, 1997, Kristen Modafferi finished her shift at a coffee shop inside Crocker Galleria, a bright, busy shopping center in downtown San Francisco. It was the kind of place people passed through constantly: office workers, tourists, students, employees on break. Nothing about that afternoon looked unusual. Kristen had worked her shift. She had work, a class, and a summer ahead of her. To the people around her, it was just another weekday in the city. But less than an hour later, Kristen was reportedly seen again inside the same mall. This time, she was on the second floor with a blonde woman no one has ever been able to identify. After that, the trail began to thin. Kristen Deborah Modafferi had turned 18 only a few weeks earlier. She had grown up in Charlotte, North Carolina, and had just completed her freshman year at North Carolina State University. That summer, she came to the Bay Area to study photography at UC Berkeley, work, explore, and experience a new city on her own. She was creative, independent, and interested in art, photography, and the world around her. She was living in Oakland, working during the week at Spinelli's coffee shop, and also had a weekend job connected to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. By all appearances, Kristen was not trying to disappear from her life. She was building one. And that is what makes the next part so difficult to understand. A young woman leaves work in the middle of the afternoon. She is seen with someone no one can identify. Then the plans that made her disappearance feel unlikely begin to fall away. Everything about Kristen's summer seemed temporary, busy, and full of possibility, until one afternoon after work, when her route stopped making sense. On June 23, 1997, Kristen Modafferi worked her shift at Spinelli's coffee shop inside Crocker Galleria in San Francisco's financial district. According to reports, her shift ended at around 3 p.m. Before leaving, she had reportedly asked co-workers for directions toward Baker Beach, near the Land's End area. That detail did not seem alarming at the time. Kristen was new to the Bay Area. She liked photography, art, and exploring. A trip toward the coast could have been exactly the kind of thing she came to California to do. But about 45 minutes later, co-workers reportedly saw Kristen again on the second floor of Crocker Galleria. She was not alone. She appeared to be with a blonde woman who has never been identified. At the time, it may have seemed like nothing more than a brief conversation in a public place. Later, it would become one of the most important parts of the case. The blonde woman may have had no connection to the case, or she may have known where Kristen intended to go next. In a crowded mall, Kristen was seen with someone, and somehow, that person disappeared from the story too. The next day, June 24th, Kristen did not show up for the first session of her photography class at UC Berkeley. She had already paid for the course. She also never picked up her final paycheck from work, reportedly worth about $400. Together, those details made the idea that she had simply left much harder to accept. The first strange thing was not that Kristen left work. It was that everything she had been building toward, the class, the paycheck, the summer, was suddenly left behind. But Kristen had turned 18 only a few weeks earlier, and because she was legally an adult, the first response to her disappearance became more complicated. At the beginning, there was a possibility that she had left voluntarily. That assumption did not end the concern, but it did slow the urgency around the case. Her family did not immediately know the full situation, and by the time they realized Kristen had not returned home for days, valuable time had already passed. Once the search began, The trail moved away from Crocker Galleria and across the city. Search dogs reportedly followed Kristen's scent from the area near the mall to the Muni 38 Geary bus line, a route that could take someone west toward the ocean, near Sutro Heights, Land's End, and the coast. The scent was later traced toward that area before it was lost. But according to reports, no confirmed evidence was found there that explained what had happened to her. That opened one possible theory, that Kristen may have gone toward the coast and suffered an accident near the water or the cliffs. It was a reasonable possibility for investigators to consider, but it had one problem. The area was public, visited, and active. Kristen's family questioned how something could have happened there without producing a clearer witness or a more definite trace. Then came another strange detail. In Kristen's room, her family found a copy of the Bay Guardian newspaper in the trash. A personal ad had been circled. The ad was looking for a young woman to join in activities like listening to music, photography, walking, drinking coffee, and exploring the Bay Area. Interests that closely matched Kristen's life at the time. But it was never confirmed whether Kristen had answered the ad, placed it, or had any contact with the person behind it. The ad became another possible lead, but like so many parts of this case, it did not lead to a clear answer. On July 10, 1997, the case took another troubling turn when a man called KGO TV and gave a disturbing story about Kristen's fate. According to reports, the caller was later identified as John Onuma. He eventually admitted that the story was false and said he had made it up to cause trouble for two women he knew. Onuma denied knowing Kristen, and no one was charged in her disappearance because of that call. Still, his name remained connected to public discussion of the case, partly because of his behavior and his connection to personal ads in the Bay Area. But suspicion is not the same as proof, and in Kristen's case, proof has always been the missing piece. Years later, attention returned to the Oakland house where Kristen had been living. Independent investigators and experts working with the family examined the property, and reports described possible indications from dogs and chemical testing related to human decomposition. But those findings have remained disputed and have not been officially confirmed by police as conclusive evidence. Each clue seemed to point somewhere, but none of them led Kristen home. For Kristen's family, the disappearance became more than a private tragedy. They had to push to keep her name visible, offer a reward, hire help, and challenge a system that did not always respond quickly to missing adults. Her case exposed a painful gap. At 18, Kristen was no longer treated like a missing child, but her family still struggled to access the attention and resources they desperately needed. That gap helped lead to Kristen's Act, signed into law in 2000, to support efforts in missing adult cases. But the law did not solve Kristen's disappearance. What is known is that she left work, was seen with an unidentified blonde woman, missed a class she had already paid for, and never came home. Kristen's disappearance did not end with one family's unanswered question. It exposed a gap in how missing adults were treated, and forced that gap into the national conversation. What makes Kristen Modafferi's case so difficult to forget is how ordinary everything looked before it broke apart. A summer job, a photography class, a young woman learning her way through a new city. Nothing about that should have become a mystery, but the smallest details became the ones that lingered. The unidentified blonde woman, the bus route toward the coast, the personal ad that may or may not have mattered, and the fact that Kristen was just old enough to fall into a gap the system was not prepared to handle. This case is also a reminder that not every compelling clue becomes proof. A lead can feel important and still remain unresolved. A person can seem suspicious and still not be legally connected. And in a case with no confirmed ending, the most responsible answer is not certainty, it is caution. Kristen Modafferi's story is unsettling because it happened in public, in motion, in a city full of people. And still, somewhere after Crocker Galleria, the trail split into fragments. Until someone comes forward, the central question remains the same. What happened after Kristen left the mall? Kristen Modafferi's story shows how someone can vanish in the middle of a city and still leave behind only fragments. But a timeline does not have to break in a crowded place to become impossible to explain. Sometimes they begin after a harmless night out, when a group of friends should have taken the familiar road home. In 1978, 5 young men left a basketball game in Chico and somehow ended up somewhere they were never expected to be. File number 01F. the file that still has one missing piece, the Yuba County Five. 4 days after 5 friends vanished, searchers found their car abandoned on a snowy mountain road in Plumas National Forest. It was Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego, sitting far from the route the group should have taken home. The car had fuel in the tank. It was not badly damaged. According to reports, when investigators later tried to start it, the engine still worked. But the 5 men who had been inside it were gone. And from that moment, the question was no longer only where they were, it was why they had driven there at all. The 5 friends, Gary Mathias, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Waher, and Jack Madruga, came from the Yuba County area of Northern California. They were close, bonded by routine, family, and basketball. Together, they played for the Gateway Gators, a team connected to a program for people who needed extra support. They were adults, but they were also men, whose families looked out for them closely. Men with familiar habits, familiar plans, and a world that usually made sense. That was part of what made their disappearance so strange. The next day, they were expected to play in an important basketball event, something they had reportedly been excited about for days. Some had prepared their uniforms. Gary Mathias had even reminded his mother not to let him oversleep. They had every reason to come home that night. On February 24, 1978, the group drove to Chico to watch a basketball game between UC Davis and Chico State. Afterward, they stopped at Bears Market for snacks and drinks. That stop became the last confirmed sighting of all 5 men together. At first, it looked like a late trip home that had gone wrong, but somewhere after Chico, the road they took stopped making sense. That night, Gary, Bill, Jack Hewitt, Ted, and Jack Madruga drove from the Yuba County area to Chico for a college basketball game. By all accounts, nothing about the trip suggested they would not return. They had no known reason to disappear. They were expected home, and the next morning, they had something important waiting for them. A basketball event with the Gateway Gators, a game their families said they had been looking forward to. After the game in Chico, the 5 friends stopped at Bears Market to buy snacks and drinks. According to reports, this was the last confirmed time anyone outside the group saw all 5 men together. After that stop, the confirmed timeline ended. By the next morning, their families began to realize something was wrong. Ted Waher had not returned home. Then it became clear that Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias had not returned either. Families called one another, trying to understand whether the men had stayed somewhere, taken a detour, or been delayed. But no simple explanation appeared. At first, it may have seemed like a late return that had gone badly. Maybe the car had broken down. Maybe they had become lost. Maybe they had stopped somewhere and could not call. But that explanation had one problem. On February 28th, Jack Madruga's Mercury Montego was found in Plumas National Forest, on a snowy mountain road, far from the normal route back to Yuba County. The car was not destroyed. It still had gas. And according to reports, when investigators later tried to start it, the engine worked. A wrong turn can explain a road, but it cannot easily explain every decision that followed. The car was not the end of the road. It was the beginning of the mystery. It gave investigators one fixed point, but every direction away from it raised a different question. Why were they in that part of the mountains at all? Why did they leave the only shelter they had in the cold? And if the car could still run, why did no one drive it back out? The location made things even stranger. This was not a road they needed to take to get home from Chico. It was remote, cold, and covered in snow. The men were not dressed for a long walk through winter conditions. Yet at some point, all 5 left the vehicle. Investigators could consider the possibility that the car became stuck, and the group decided to look for help. But even that answer felt incomplete. The vehicle was only lightly stuck, according to reports, and it was still functional. Staying inside the car may have offered more protection than walking into the dark. Then came a witness whose story made the mountain road feel even less empty. A man named Joseph Shawns later said he had also been stranded in the same general area that night while experiencing serious health trouble. According to his account, he saw lights, heard voices, and called out for help. He said the people he saw did not answer, and that the lights eventually went out. His statement has always been treated carefully because Shawns was in distress at the time, and some details could not be fully confirmed. Still, his account added another layer of unease. If he really saw or heard people near that road, were they the 5 men? Were they frightened, confused, or simply unable to respond? Or was the situation already more complicated than anyone understood? The search that followed was difficult and exhausting. Snow covered the area, making it hard to see tracks, follow movement, or determine which direction the men had gone. According to reports, searchers used dogs, horses, aircraft, snow equipment, and thousands of hours of effort. The winter search gave back almost nothing. Months passed. Then, after the snow began to melt, the case shifted again. In June 1978, a Forest Service trailer was discovered near the Daniel Zink campground area, roughly 19 to 20 miles from where the car had been abandoned. Inside, searchers found Ted Weher. What investigators found there made the mystery even harder to explain. Reports suggested Ted may have survived in the trailer for some time after the group vanished. There was food nearby. There were materials that could have helped with warmth. There were supplies that, under different circumstances, might have kept someone alive longer. But many of those things had not been used, or had not been used fully. That was deeply troubling. If Ted had reached shelter, why had he not used more of what was available? Was he too weak? Did he not know the supplies were there? Could someone else have been with him at first? Or had confusion, fear, and the conditions made even simple survival choices impossible? As the search continued, the remains of Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jack Hewitt were found in areas between the abandoned car and the trailer, or near the trailer area. Their deaths were believed to be connected to exposure, cold, and the harsh conditions they faced after leaving the car. But Gary Mathias was never found, and one detail inside the trailer made his absence even more difficult to understand. Gary's shoes were reportedly found there. Ted's shoes were missing. That opened a possible theory that Gary may have reached the trailer, changed shoes, and later walked away, perhaps trying to find help. But like so much in this case, it remained only a theory. By the time the snow gave up some of its answers, the case had become even harder to explain. 4 families learned that Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, Ted Weher, and Jack Madruga had not survived. Gary Mathias's family was left with a different kind of pain. No body, no confirmed final location, and no complete ending. The Yuba County Five case did not end when the men were found. In some ways, that was when the questions became heavier. There was no conviction in the case. No official explanation answered why the group drove into the mountains, why they left a working car, why the trailer's supplies were not fully used, or where Gary Mathias went after the others disappeared. What began as 5 friends returning from a basketball game became one of California's most discussed unsolved mysteries, not because there were no clues, but because the clues never formed a complete path home. The Yuba County Five case is difficult to forget, because every explanation seems to answer one question while leaving another one behind. A wrong turn may explain how the men reached the mountain road. It does not fully explain why they stayed on it, why they left a car that could still run, or why shelter and supplies were not used in the way we might expect. And this is where the story requires care. It would be too easy and deeply unfair to reduce the entire mystery to the men's disabilities or mental health histories. Those factors may have shaped how they responded under fear, cold, and confusion, but they do not erase the larger questions surrounding that night. What remains is a case built around missing pieces: the road they chose, the decision to leave the car, the long walk through the snow, the trailer, and Gary Mathias, who was never found. The Yuba County Five case feels like a story with one page missing. We know where the men were seen. We know where the car was found. We know where 4 of them were later discovered. But the reason they went into the mountains is still missing. And until that piece is found, every theory remains unfinished. Across all 3 cases, the most unsettling part is not only that people vanished, it is how ordinary everything looked before the timeline went silent. A run in the mountains, a shift at a coffee shop, a basketball game with friends. Each story began inside routine, and each one broke at a point no one fully understood until it was too late. That is why these cases stay with us. They remind us that unanswered mysteries are not built only from darkness or distance. Sometimes they are built from missed details, delayed reactions, fragile assumptions, and the space between what people saw and what they understood. Maybe the hardest truth is that there may not be one complete answer yet, only fragments, questions, and families still waiting for clarity. Stay safe, pay attention to the details others overlook, and thank you for watching.
This file may be closed, but the truth is always out there. What do you think really happened? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to follow the next case. I'm Detective Frost, and this is the Cold Files.